As the Future Investment Initiative rounds up in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia today, world leaders and high-level delegates continue to engage on ways to unlock prosperity. Nigeria was ably represented by the Minister of State, Industry in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, John Owan Enoh. He granted Arise News this exclusive interview with Vimbai Mutinhiri Ekpenyong on the sidelines of the conference. Let's take a look.
It's day 2 of the Future Investment Initiative, the 9th edition taking place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. What an outing it has been. There have been so many stimulating conversations, and one of those was around macroeconomic stability. What is the key to sustaining it? And of course, Nigeria was very ably represented by the Minister of State for Trade, Honorable Minister John Owan Enoh. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the program. Great to have you here on Arise News.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here in Arise News studio in faraway Riyadh.
Yes.
And just to correct, Minister of State, Industry.
Industry. All right. My in-law.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. I mean, always cross river.
Yes, always cross river. But let's get straight into it. I mean, that panel was a hub of ideas. And the conversations there had several parallels. I love that you sat next to the minister from Saudi Arabia, who spoke a lot about how they have been able to diversify from being 90% dependent on oil down to about 60% or so. And it sounded a lot like the Nigerian story and what we're trying to achieve. So can you just give me some of your insights into our journey just over the past couple of years? Because of course we know that the reforms have happened. We've seen the impact of them on the macroeconomic level. We'll deal with the micro later. But just from your perspective, have we turned the corner? How are we faring with our reforms?
I mean, I think it's amazing, when you look at the picture, when you look at where we were post this administration, where we are now, 2 years and some months. I mean, we passed through a period that was characterized by so much uncertainty, by so many distortions, and therefore the country was almost at a brink. Unfortunately, not too many Nigerians were or are in a position to appreciate so. And I think that what the government and the country needed was bold leadership, was disciplined leadership, was focused leadership. And all of these, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu embodied, which is why the very profound decisions he took on day one, became so very consequential in terms of getting us to where we are. I mean, removal of fuel subsidy was something that nobody thought could happen. I mean, the data spoke to what it was and how bad it was. What it required to match that data was leadership, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu provided it. So resources were freed up, right, instead of being wasted in terms of those who were getting the subsidies and they were not deserving of it. I mean, the exchange rates, I mean, the gap between the official and what was going on elsewhere in the parallel market was close to 70%. But now where are we? I mean, it's gone down to about 1%. I mean, that's what I started by saying that's amazing. So what it is that stable, focused, courageous leadership has gotten Nigeria to navigate through a period in which we can talk about economic stability. I mean, I gave a particular statistic at the panel discussion. And that statistic was important to me because at some point in the lifetime of the last administration, there was some conflicting talk from within the country and abroad about the fact that Nigeria's net foreign reserves were in the negative. I mean, I came face to face with that, right? And can correctly say that it was actually close to less than $1 billion. As at 2 months ago, the net foreign reserves had climbed to about 22 billion or 25 billion. I mean, the totality of our foreign reserves about 43 billion. Now, we're not yet where we should be, but I think that we are where we can comfortably cope with whatever shocks that Nigeria experiences. So all of that. And again, the growth that we're experiencing, yes, at the macro level, that is what we're doing the right things to achieve economic stability, right? For our economy to be resilient. At the micro level, you said we're going to come to, that has to do with Nigeria's growth at the macro level. It's also, there's an attempt to replicate it at the micro level in terms of increasing opportunities. So you talk about Saudi Arabia, and you are right to say almost like the similar experiences, growing from an economy in which oil was the predominant, oil was about everything. We may not have been able to achieve the kind of, the same degree, of progress. But I think that for our country, Mr. President's 7-point agenda, 8-point agenda, and there are 7, speaks to economic diversification, to accelerate it. And I think that is what this government has tried to achieve, which is why in the second quarter GDP for 2025, right, the economy grew GDP about 4.2, 4.3%. The drivers of that growth for the first time in so long was not just oil, was also industry. What it means is that government is beginning to achieve those objectives. And I mean, to achieve, a stable macroeconomic, macroeconomic stability, it has to do with a lot of these things that government is doing. Government must reform, and reforms are going on. Other sectors must also be playing their own role in this space to be able to complement what bold action that the administration is taking.
Absolutely. I love that you say that, because I think it was Mr. Mullis, the banker, who also said that, there needs to be this cohesive movement from both private and public. However, I want to rewind a little bit to, the removal of subsidy and, where it has taken us and, all the significance around it, which has been unpacked so many times by so many different people. But my question to you is, does the politics matter? Because currently the conversation at home, we're in Riyadh, but of course we're still connected with what's happening at home. The conversation is, well, if this had been allowed to happen over a decade ago when it had been proposed by the Goodluck Jonathan administration, it wouldn't have been as painful as it has been for us today. And they're saying that the current president is the person who stopped us from making that transition a decade ago. Does the politics matter?
Well, politics does matter. I mean, there's no situation or context in which politics will not matter. But it also depends on the direction of the politics that matters or doesn't matter. I mean, I don't understand when people say, if this was allowed several years ago, I don't understand. That administration was President Goodluck Jonathan's administration. It was his call to make the decision or not.
So he should have allowed the protest.
It was his call. It was his call. He was the president. He was the commander-in-chief, right? And I think that when people talk about it was this president that said this, that said that, right? I mean, the buck stopped in the table of the president and commander-in-chief. It was his decision to take that decision. It was his matter to take that decision or not. The fact that he didn't take that decision means he couldn't rise up to the challenge. And politics, leadership comes with ability, to be courageous enough to rise up to the challenge. When President Bola Ahmed Tinubu took that decision, I'm not too sure, but I've heard from, those who write for the president, the speech writers and all that, that decision wasn't even contained in the speech that was prepared for him. That is what leadership is about. He knew what he wanted to do. He was very forthright about it. He went ahead and did it. Now, because that decision wasn't taken several years back, we cannot now say whether it should have been harder or simpler. Those are matters of conjecture. But what I can tell you is that politics does matter. And I don't think that it was because either President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, then as, not a president, whether it was him that made Jonathan not to take that decision. I mean, that would be done. I'm not too sure that even Goodluck Jonathan himself is going to accept that narrative because he was president and needed to have taken that decision. But having said so, where are we now? We are where a president has taken that decision, right? Yes, it has come, across the world. Reforms are not easy matters. Reforms come with backlashes. What is important is to identify that and to remain focused because you know where you are headed. The mass of the people are prepared to follow only if the leader is prepared to provide leadership. And we've got a president who is providing leadership. We've got a president whose the decisions he's taken have been so defining of where we are I mean, there are stories about investors and business people who say, they sit in the comfort of their homes and they make requests for foreign, for FX, and they get delivered to them. There was a time that people who came to Nigeria either for conferences or summits with their cards, and all that, those cards couldn't work. It couldn't work because of the lack of confidence in the Nigerian system.
But Honorable Minister, even given that context, the FDI numbers are down. They're still low. Portfolio investments are the key driver of investment at the moment, money coming into Nigeria. How does this balance out? Because the sustainable investment that we are looking for, that is supposed to be attracted by these beautiful numbers, one has to admit, that are presented by our macroeconomic indices at the moment. But the FDI is still not coming in. Earlier, you spoke to your industrial policy that is being finalized. What is the real effort that is being made? Because, Nigerians are getting impatient.
Well, why not? Nigerians have good reason to be impatient. Unfortunately, that impatience, all of that, is towards the present administration, by its circumstances. I mean, and you are right to say that FDIs, haven't come up as much, haven't come in as much.
A lot of pledges, but we're not seeing them being fulfilled.
And all of that. First, everything is not going to get achieved at the same time. Everything is going to get achieved at the same time. I mean, it's going to take a lot of confidence building, right? I mean, what is important is that the government is doing all the right things that are supposed to now deserve the coming in of FDIs. So the government is doing its own. The country is on the right track. The country has achieved stability. It has achieved stability enough for investments to come in.
But they're not coming.
Yeah. I mean,
so we
are where it should now come, right? So what it is, maybe tomorrow, the next 2 weeks, the next 1 month, there's no doubt, for example, that we now have an impetus in the system that should now allow foreign direct investments to come in. And when we attend, investment forums like this, right, wherever we go to, I mean, the other day, I was part of the BRICS, partnership for new industrial revolution that took place in China. I mean, from there, I was part of the ONGA, UNIDO, high, profile engagement that talked about, the, fourth industrial decade for Africa. And I'm here again. I'm not just me, different other ministers are also in different parts of the world. We're saying about the same thing. I mean, we're, speaking to the Nigerian story. The more that, goes out, the more there is knowledge about where we are, the more we're able to build confidence. One of the things that could also be the matter is that Nigeria has had quite a history, going through all of this. And I think that certain times, the investing public is also, still trying to watch to see whether the present direction will be sustained.
And talking about that, we're going into political season. We're rounding up this year. By next year, we know how the cycle works in Nigeria. At some point during the course of the year, the attention will shift to politics. So, if this isn't achieved by the time everybody turns their attention to politics, then what's the hope? How do you navigate that?
The country will not stop because politics has come in. Okay. There will still be governance. This government is elected first for a first 4-year term, and it gets a second term after the election for another 4 years. So government will not just stop. And I think that because of the focus of the present administration, the present administration couldn't have provided the leadership to take us through where it has taken us through. The president himself at different times has admitted that he knows Nigerians are suffering. No leadership is elected, and it comes and it wants to make sure its people suffer. So the president also has an eye in terms of the developments that happen economically, in spite of the politics season that is going to come in. Because the president, like everybody else, would not want us to reverse the gains. As long as those gains remain sustained, whether there is politics, whether there's no politics, I think that those investments, because the condition for them to come in has been laid. The difficulties in terms of what we've done and where we are
Okay.
I don't think that, there's greater difficulty in terms of attracting those investments. They will come because the world over, there's also a recognition that Nigeria has a business-friendly president who has done it before when he was governor of Lagos, who is continued to do the same thing, who is continued to take sides with the business community, and therefore those investments will come.
And let's talk about that, because you also touched on industrialization, rapid industrialization. We know what our economy currently looks like. There's a heavy focus on the services sector, but we know industrialization is where household incomes are going to be lifted up. We know that's where, the gains, if I may call them that, can actually trickle down to just the average person on the street. Tell me where you are with the industrial policy, because we've been talking about it, we've heard about it for a while, and you mentioned it on your panel as well. But there's a sense that it's also taking a little bit too long. So where are we with that?
Okay, well, thank God that we're even where we're talking about an industrial policy. It was totally lacking. I mean, in decades, we've not had. I mean, whereas we've always had a trade policy, investment policy, and all of, we've not had an industrial policy. And I think that one of the first things that confronted me when I got reassigned, with the industry mandate, was some talk that, there are bodies like UNDP and co that won't even listen to me unless there's an industrial policy.
So how have your predecessors been working?
I mean, I got set to work.
Wow.
Right? And I'm happy to report that from taking the first step, and I have what I call the Industrial Revolution Work Group that I chair, and the president of MAN is the co-chair. So from day one, my approach has been collaborative, working with the private sector, right? Getting them in the room, foreign, agencies, all of them, everybody in the room, Algon, the subnational, governors forum, that, we've been able to finally, we have a policy. Right. The only thing that is left is that policy has to go to FEC, for final approval. But it's been validated. The meaning of validation is that everything that needs to go in is in, everything that needs to get out is out. So we have a clean copy
so
now.
What are the timelines?
If, for example, FEC were to hold today and is presented and is approved, right, what will remain would just be to formally unveil, if at all. So effectively, we got a policy, but it's just waiting, for FEC approval. And that policy, it's a defining policy. It has its vision. It has, its trust in terms of the various things that it needs to achieve. And I think that the policy as policy will not get us to where we should be. It is implementing that policy, right? It is the will, the part of government to implement that policy. And so far, I think government has shown that will. A few things have, first thing the president did when he became president was to do an intervention, for industry in terms of the different subsets and all of that. Next thing, when the budget was being considered 2025, he made sure, there was an increase, to BOI in terms of 500 billion. All of that is taking place, and working with, within the life of this administration, for the first time, Nigeria has joined a few other African countries to have what we call Program for Country Partnership, PCP, with UNIDO. Otherwise, before now, it's always been country partnership and all that. But it's been scaled up. We have about 2 or 3 other African countries that are going ahead of us in terms of implementing the PCP. And before I left Nigeria, we formally inaugurated the NCB, the National Coordination Body, inaugurated by the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, so that PCP can begin to get implemented. So a lot of that is going on.
I like that you're focusing on implementation. Even with the industrial policy, in essence, it's a piece of paper without the implementation.
You're right.
It's been months since we heard the unveiling of the Nigeria First policy, and yet to see any implementation. Again, it was a welcome development, got many people excited, but where are we with that?
Well, okay, now, incidentally, about last week, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria had its 53rd AGM, annual general meeting. It was supposed to be headlined by Aliko Dangote, Nigeria's foremost industrialist. The president, was supposed to be in attendance. And the key thrust of what MAN wanted the president to speak about was the Nigerian First policy, right? In that room, at that event, I represented Mr. President, and the DG of BPP, was also there, and he spoke to a lot of these issues about implementation. Now, the Nigeria First policy is in focus, and the BPP working with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment are key in terms of that implementation on the part of the public sector, and it has to do with what the various procurements. It has to do with how nothing gets done from anybody outside unless there is no capacity. Unless there's no before the end of the year, the BPP and the ministry are going to come up with the broad framework for the implementation of Nigeria First policy.
So we don't have a framework.
No. I mean, and you're not necessarily waiting for that framework before implementation can start, because what the BPP is doing is that in approving various procurement requests, that implementation is already being effected, right? At the individual level, I can tell you that both the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, with responsibility for trade and investment, and me, Minister of State in charge of industry, I mean, what we have done is to patronize made in Nigeria vehicles as our official vehicles.
When will we see the president join?
So all of that, I mean, in the course of implementing that policy, I mean, that is going to happen because the gains of doing so are so enormous.
Do you drive a made in Nigeria car?
I drive a made in Nigeria car. Now, I just mentioned it. Yes, a car by Meccano.
Oh, fantastic.
By Meccano. Okay. And the Minister in charge of trade and investment drives a car made by not vehicles or whatever. Okay. I mean, the Hilux I have is by which company is that? It's also a Nigerian assembled vehicle. Okay. So bit by bit, I believe that we'll be able to turn the needle, right? So a lot of work is going on, and my mandate as Minister in charge of Industry is to also promote made in Nigeria goods and services. Our hope is that before the end of the year, we're going to put together a national campaign for this, right? So just so that it doesn't just end.
But Honorable Minister, we've seen these campaigns before. Under the Buhari administration, buy Nigerian was a big tagline, but it was great for PR buzz, but it didn't translate.
There are a lot of things that didn't translate before that are being translated under the present administration.
And I'm glad you're saying that. I'm glad you say that because, one of the focuses, I believe, on your panel as well was around adjusting, being able to take those risks, but seeing when there's a need to adjust in policy directions. Where do you think adjustments need to be made so that these policies can be implemented in a more nimble way? Because great announcements coming, but there's a bit of frustration brewing because Nigerian businesses, SMEs, are waiting to be contracted by the government so they can provide their goods and services under the Nigeria First policy. Soon it will be 1 year and they aren't able to do that.
First, I think that contracting is going on.
Okay.
That contracting is going on.
Okay.
When we talk about adjustments, I mean, institutional adaptability, to the dynamism of the world order, right? I mean, it's going on. You give the example. The challenge of the MSMEs, they're talking about waiting for, government for contracting and all that, is that we're also at a point in which we haven't tried to get some kind of sense of the numbers and of the various MSMEs, because government interventions keep getting rolled out, not just by this administration, but also especially by this administration. But one of the things at the ministry level will be considering is the fact that interventions not for the fun of it. The interventions must be a means to an end. If you're talking about MSMEs, it's micro, medium, and small enterprises. So we must have some way that we can verify by data that a certain level of intervention has been able to get a micro enterprise to progress to medium to small, and then to scale up. All that is going on. I can assure you that the difference between this administration and others, in fairness, is that I think that there is also a greater focus on outcomes, not necessarily input-output, but on outcomes. How the effort and the work of government, how is it affecting the earnings of Nigerians, the citizens? How is it affecting production in industry? How is it affecting the volume of exports and all of that? And there are also data that are encouraging, to the extent that, I mean, you can report that some progress is being made. That progress is not just going to take place all in
but
one
they'll
go.
tell you it's rebasing.
But it is great. Well, you talk about rebasing. Not so much that, and we can reduce it to its very simplistic level, that I've heard independently, without asking questions, how people have volunteered and have said a bag of rice they were buying a certain amount, yesterday, they are now able to buy it a different amount lesser today. Those figures are there. And therefore what it is that I think that we are progressing in the right direction. And I think that we are also, mindful of the fact that in spite of the disruptions in world trade and all of that, that we are still, playing essentially in a globalized world with all the issues about AI, technology, innovation, and all of that. We're also very mindful of that.
Now, very quickly before you go, I want to look at an outlook or a forecast of, this year is rounding up. Looking at 2026, there's a concern around just the way some businesses behave, which is that when the tax laws come in, that prices will skyrocket, that incomes will be further eroded. And the businesses are also saying the interest rates from the bank are not helping matters. So my question is, how prepared are you for the incoming tax reforms and the unintended consequences that they yield in our peculiar space, where we know that sometimes businesses do have a tendency of taking advantage of those small windows to hike up prices? What's the plan?
Well, what's going on now, from what you have characterized, is that there is that initial anxiety that is driven by the fact that there's something novel and new that is going to come up from 1st January. But I think that, there's no, you can't make a mistake about it. The new tax laws that are due for implementation from January represent the most progressive, attempt by any administration.
So timing-wise, you don't think they'll destabilize some of those macroeconomic indices, your inflation for one?
Well, I think that, and we got different bodies that are also set to work and are also, preparing for that. I mean, we've got the FCCPC and all of that. We've got various agencies of government, that are working, because, the fears that Nigerians are expressing, for which, you're talking about here, are also not fears that are hidden from government and its agencies. And therefore, there's quite a lot of work. First, let me say that I don't know, I'm not too sure Nigerians are actually, try to understand these or saw these or appreciated these. When Mr. President assented to the tax laws, right? For the first time, the tax laws became law, and a decision was taken that implementation will have to take place from January, right? Normal situations, after assenting, they become law, implementation will start. It's also because of that same attempt to try to understand the mood and to try to see those things that need to be done ahead of that implementation. And there's been a lot of back and forth going on between different bodies, whether you're talking about the export processing zones, authority associations, people that are affected in one way or the other by what the details of this law would require. A lot of exchanges are going on. And I think that all of these are supposed to inform and mitigate against the fears that you are here expressing.
But do you think the tax laws will be slightly inflationary when they're implemented?
Well, I mean, I don't understand why they should. I don't understand why they should, because these tax laws were intended to be pro small businesses, right? I mean, a lot of tax burden taken off a lot of people, and the focus is on big players and all of that. So I won't understand. I don't think there's a direct one-on-one relationship with what that fear is. Whatever is going to come up will be unintended, and I think that government is government for the people, would be able to respond accordingly.
All right. And maybe just a final message for those who are anxious that their incomes are going to be eroded in a time where we're hoping that we can have people stimulate industry and get active, but people are also worried that how incomes are going to be eroded. So, who is industry producing for if people's incomes, people are worried about their income being eroded?
Let me say this. I'm going to answer that by saying this. I believe that our worst moments are behind us. I believe like that. If those incomes matter, those industry matter in terms of goods and all of that, we've passed the worst of that. And I think we're headed northwards, right? And I think that it's also important and instructive that you've not had industries and factories close their shops under this administration.
Are you sure? Because
I mean, the numbers
the
before this
Manufacturing
administration, the numbers were on a daily basis and all of that.
I mean, they've reported trillions that they've lost.
There's been so much engagement between industry and manufacturing association of Nigeria, so much of engagement.
But they've lost trillions.
To the extent they've lost
since
trillions
2023.
to other things that are taking place before the administration. Whether you're talking about the forex forward contracts and all of that, and all the abuse and of that system. I mean, those have been fallout of a lot of the things that took place before now. But what I can say is that industry, manufacturers now have a say more than at any other time. There's about nothing we do in industry that we don't have the main players, Nasima, all of those key players and all that being part of what we are doing, because we're also mindful about how it affects them, because our greatest challenge and the solution to those challenges still lies in production, and in production. So we're careful about that. So I don't think that, the time ahead of us will just be time for the benefits, right, of the reforms and the benefits of the economic stability that the country has achieved to begin to register, not otherwise.
All right. Well, we continue to wait and see. Honorable Minister, this has been a fantastic conversation, insightful. I hope you enjoy your time in Riyadh, and I hope you've got some inspiration to bring home some of the incredible developments that we see here in Saudi Arabia.
I mean, why not? Why not? And I think that, it's fortunately, I've said in the course of this interview that, Nigeria's, at present resilience and stability, is sufficient to attract the investments that we need. And I think it's dynamic enough, right, for growth to happen. And it's inclusive enough to carry everybody along. And I think that, we expect that that's what's going to happen.
Thank you so much. Because I know our viewers will be saying, is it not the same oil in Saudi Arabia that we have in Nigeria? But on that note, thank you so much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you.